Yo, it's Arcade and today I'm gonna show you how to make dark underground house. It's gonna be a very clubby, atmospheric house track. So let's get to it. Also, this video is brought to you by Soundcore, more on that later. So let's get started with the most important thing, and that is probably the drums. So to kick things off, the kick. I have a kick like this. So here a sample selection is important. You want like a deeper kick, sort of clubby kick. This is the kick I went with. Very deep, very bassy. And I also have this top kick, just to make that initial hit a little bit more obvious. Another thing you want to do is play with the kick a little bit. So sometimes I have like a double kick here. And what you can do there is click on the kick, click on the graph editor here, and adjust the volume of the second kick. So it's more like a filler kick. And then I have this variation as well. So you want to play with the rhythm a little bit. And in the song, it looks something like this. So yeah, you can just do feels like this with the kick, which is a bit unusual, but it works. So then we have the claps. I'm using a clap for my sample pack, and it's this one. Like really simple, very hand clappy, like a slap almost. And then I layer it with this one, which is a really deep clap, almost like a lo-fi clap. It has no high frequencies, which I like for this type of genre. And I think selecting the drum samples is really important to set the vibe. Just like deep sounds work really well for this type of track. So here's the clap. Simple rhythm, but again, a few variations. Also note that I have the swing on right here at around 50%, which makes everything a bit more groovy and offbeat. And then I play with different layers. So one of the layers is on here, but another one is not, to create another feel with the claps. And you might think this is boring, but this is actually super important and makes a huge difference in the whole track. So it's not just the same thing over and over. So there's another fill right here. This is a more complex one, and I usually use this one at the end of like a major repetition. Here's how it sounds with the drums. Next, I added some hi-hats. So I have a few stray hi-hats just like randomly in the intro, sort of to get the song alive. Just have a hi-hat here and there, just to sort of hint on that the hi-hats are coming, but not fully just yet. Now in here, I use some drum loops combined with some of my own drums. So here's the first loop I chose. So a really nice sort of like breakbeaty loop, but it's also pretty subtle. And then I have this loop, which is like a lot of shakers and hi-hats. And together with the drums and claps, it sounds like this. You can actually create some unique drum beats even though you are using some loops. And to finish this off, I also added an open hi-hat of my own. It's two open hi-hats, this one and this one. So it's actually the same one, I just shortened the second one by turning down the out knob. So we have this rhythm. Really simple, but it actually works pretty well when you shorten the other one. Having one longer and one shorter creates a whole different rhythm than having both of them long. I also added fruity phaser on these hi-hats, just like the default presets, and some reverb, which results in like the hi-hat being sort of random every time. That's what the phaser does. So yeah, I really love this drum loop. I think the drum loop is the most important thing when it comes to this genre. Now let's move on to the next sound, which is the effects and the atmosphere. Also very important. So let me go through some effects that I used here. First, we have some down sweeps. You always want to have some sweeps in there to have that white noise and stuff like that. Also up sweeps. And then I have this vocal shot, which I think adds a lot of atmosphere in the whole song. So just the vocal shot with a lot of delay and reverb. And I also reversed it. You do that by duplicating the vocal shot, then clicking on this icon right here, click make unique, then double click the vocal shot, click reverse. And then you have the same sound, but reversed. Then you can do stuff like this, where you connect the two of them together. and you have a simple effect. So these are some of the effects in the intro, and it's pretty basic, right? Having the effects and the drums right first makes a huge difference, and then making the rest of the song is way easier when the vibe is set. So now let's move on to the more melodic stuff like the bass. But before we do, as a music producer, I care a lot about sound. And today we have a sponsor that I think has the best sounding earbuds out there. And that is Soundcore with their new Liberty 4 earbuds. Now with their ACAA 3.0 technology that has 2 dynamic drivers, the sound is as crisp and clear as it gets. Honestly, listening to music on these earbuds is a whole different experience, and you can really hear all the details in the songs, and since you hear everything, you can actually produce and mix your music with these earbuds as well. And to make this even better, they added some innovative technology like the spatial audio with head tracking, which basically makes it seem like you are in a cinema or at a concert. So when I move my head like this, the sound is now coming from this direction, and when I turn this way, I hear it from this direction. That is just crazy to me. Soundcore always surprises me with some new technology. You can also choose between music or video mode, so the audio is adjusted perfectly. And if you want to turn off the head tracking, you can do that too. Now it feels like I'm surrounded by speakers. This is actually my favorite music listening mode. Just makes everything sound so different in a good way. There is more extra features like heart rate sensor, which is cool if you want to do sports with these on. And honestly, these hold really well in the ears, and I usually have a problem with that, but not with these ones, because they adapt to the shape of your ear canal. So overall, a great product. I can honestly say that to me, these are the best earbuds that you can get right now. So if you want to get a new pair, check out the link in the description below. Thanks a lot to Soundcore for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to producing. And we are back. Now let's move on to the bass. So I have 2 types of bass sounds in this track. The first one is this long deep bass, and the second one is a more rhythmical bass. So let me show you the long bass first. So I have sort of a off rhythm here, where the notes change faster than you would expect. For the sound, I'm using this Shake It Reese bass from the Stampede Ultrasonic Sounds sample pack, and I have Kickstart plugin on it, so it's sidechained. So every time the kick hits, the volume of this bass is lowered. If you need a tutorial for sidechaining, I will link it below in the description. Also, to make this more interesting, I automated the cutoff and also the EQ, so the bass is opening up as the song progresses. You know, it's becoming a bit more gritty at the end. So then we have this. So that's pretty simple, but it works really well. The reason it works is because of all the other sounds that I added before to create the right atmosphere. Let me show you another sound that I added in this part of the song, which is like an atmospheric synth. So the sound in piano roll looks pretty simple. It's just one note, and you want to make sure this note is in the key of your song, which for me was B minor. Now to find out the key of your song, just go to your bass or melody or chords, whatever. I have the bass here. Go to View, Scale Highlighting, Automatic. Now hover over the piano roll, and in the top left corner you can see the key is B minor. So that's how you find out the key of your song. So that's what this note will be, B. So it's just this one note. Now it may not seem like much alone, but with all the other sounds, it sounds pretty interesting. Now I automated one of the macros, but also the detune function, which makes a big difference. So alone, it doesn't sound like much, but in the whole song, it sounds like this. Again, further building up that atmosphere in the whole song. Okay, so now we have the intro and the like a breakdown or whatever you want to call this. Now let's transition into the build-up. And I actually created a super simple build-up, so let me show you how to do it. So here's our build-up. And finally, I introduced the rhythmical bass. This sound called Stories, and here's the rhythm. So I simplified the long bass, so I pretty much removed the connecting notes, which is like the F and E. The melody is simplified, but the rhythm is more complex now. The few tips I can give you is to have some offbeat notes, like these ones, that are not exactly on the grid, right? Because again, you have the sign chaining. The kick is going like this. So you want to have some notes that are offbeat compared to the kick, right? And this note is off compared to that. And then another tip I can give you when making bass melodies is to have longer and shorter notes. So at first I had these like this. Then I decided to make this one longer. Now, it might not sound like much, but with all the other sounds, the length of the note matters a lot. Like, it completely changes the rhythm it creates in the song. So make sure to differentiate between that as well. And if you want to make sure you are in the correct key, you can just go to View, Scale Highlighting, in Automatic. Now you can see my key is B minor. I can see it in the left corner. Now that means I can only use the notes that are highlighted. So if I stay with those highlighted notes, the highlighted grid parts, then I will stay in the key of B minor. So if you don't know music theory, you can use this to sort of help you with that. Anyways, so here is my bass. In the build-up, I introduce it with a high pass filter. It's like almost a band pass or whatever you call it. So I decided to start with the high frequencies and then introduce more of the low frequencies. And that's how this bass gets introduced to you. And then for the build-up drums, I just have my claps here, but only this layer. Then your sweeps. And then some reverse sweeps. Some risers. And some up sweeps. And then even the hi-hats. And then at the end, we have this fill. So here is how the build-up sounds. And then we will have the drop. I also forgot to mention the vocal is still here in the background as well. It's pretty much there the whole song, you know. So that's our build-up, really simple. Now let's move on to the drop. Now in the drop, I pretty much do not introduce any new sounds at first. We just put the drums back in with the kick and everything. And the bass is now playing fully with no filter. And that's pretty much it at the beginning. So the connection from the build-up to the drop is like this. Now to make this more interesting, I did add one more thing in the drop, which is this melody. So let's talk about that one. So it's this one using this sound called groove. Now here's the melody. It's a really simple one and it sort of complements the bass. So when we check the bass, again, when the bass is short, the bass sort of cuts off and this cuts off with the bass. First of all, I have quite a bit of effects here. Without them, it sounds like this. And then we have Transient Processor, which is a great plugin. So I increase the attack. That means when you increase the attack, the initial hit will be harder. And when you increase the release, the sustain or the release of the sound will hit harder. This way, the whole sound will be a bit more punchy. Now let me show you if I go to extreme. Now it's super clicky. Now it's not clicky at all. So I went somewhere here. Then we have reverb. Then we have stereo shaper with the stereoized 2 presets. That means the sound will not be in the middle of the mix, but more in the left and right speaker, sort of wider apart. I have Maximus here as well, and I increase the high band. So we have a bit more saturation on the high end. And now the important effect is the reverb effect. I automated the reverb, just right click, create automation clip on the reverb. And I automated it like this. So at first there is no reverb. But then we have sort of this pumping reverb where anytime the sound is not playing, the reverb is up to create this echo effect almost. and it gets more and more intense as it progresses. So you can just play around with that effect any way you want. And that pretty much sums up the whole song. The whole project is ready. Now let's just color it by selecting all of the patterns, renaming color. Let's go with some darker stuff. And now let's have a listen to the finished result. Now to preview it, I'm actually going to use the Liberty 4 earbuds by Soundcore because they really have amazing sound. And now I just want to hear the song through a different device. As I said before, if you want to get them, link is below. Now let's preview the result. And there you have it, guys. That is the dark underground house. All the links that you might need are below in the description. But other than that, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.